Welcome to Great Taste. I'm your host, Steve Boss. 60 minutes of deliciousness coming up. Vicky Bennison is my guest. She's the James Beard Award-winning author of Pasta Grannies and the creator of Pasta Grannies, with almost 2 million online viewers over multiple platforms. Her YouTube channel is closing in on 900,000 subscribers. Every Friday, you can log in to see a new video featuring an Italian nonna-grandmother making an amazing dish of pasta or some other specialty. For example, let me just give you one example. Last week's video featured 99-year-old Battina. She is a nonna from Sardegna, making culurgiones-a, one of my absolute favorite pastas, I have to say. And it's a very typical pasta from that island. So those are the kinds of things you can expect. Her new book is Pasta Grannies-Comfort Cooking-more, heartwarming recipes and warmth and love from Italian grandmothers. Vicky, welcome again to the show. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for inviting me again.
Well, I just know that it's important, I think, if someone isn't a subscriber, they don't know about Pasta Grannies, I want to kind of give them at least my input as to what makes this so special. And that is that it's simply that there's this warmth and love that's generated by these women. And they're in their element. They're in their own kitchen. They're doing what they do on a regular basis, something that they do out of warmth and love for their families and their friends. And that just is, that comes across through the videos. And I'm certain that that's the real reason that so many people love Pasta Grannies.
I always say that people come for the pasta and stay for the grannies.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And really the pasta is a vehicle to meet these women and then just have a very small fragment of their lives. And it's quite important actually to get them in their own homes, because as soon as you even sort of get them cooking in their daughter's kitchen, which very occasionally that happens, they're instantly not as relaxed and at ease because they don't know where the spoon is and they're not on automatic pilot. So, you know, that suddenly the cooking becomes foreground, not background, because, you know, when they're in a familiar environment, they can chat to us, and we all speak Italian. It's very conversational. We don't do telly-like things like rehearse. So it's all sort of on the hoof shooting, if you like. We work around them, which I think is the key. So in fact, Andrea, my cameraman, he's actually a news journalist. So he's used, you know, he spends most of his life in demonstrations and things like that. So he's very used to kind of chaos, if you like. And it's not that there's chaos in the kitchen, but there is that spontaneity that you have to be comfortable with. So that I think is key to sort of getting that relaxed approach. And of course, these days I have lovely Olivia De Giovanni, who is my granny finder, and her job is obviously to track these grannies down, and we do that through the family. You know, they have to have be in agreement with our grandmothers, so the relationship has already started. Before we actually arrive. We don't actually know we don't sort of say, oh, you've got to look a certain way or anything like that. We just say, you know, we're coming. So, yeah. So
Olivia is like your front person.
She's my wing woman. Yes. So, I mean, I, you know, even though I speak Italian and I could do some of the research, and I do, but it's much better to have an Italian. To put it sort of extravagantly, you know, it's much better to have an Italian nail another Italian. You know, they only know that they know
absolutely
how to seal the deal, and
yes,
far too British and polite, and so if you say so kind of thing. So it's much better.
Yes, I love this. I was speaking with Steve Sando. Probably you don't know him, but Steve is very well known in the States, because he is the biggest proponent of eating beans, we'll say, and he sells beans under his brand name as Rancho Gordo, and he is continually finding heirloom beans that are sent to him or brought to him, or somebody's grandmother still cooks in some small town in Mexico, or whatever. And he told me that he does the same thing. He has the same strategy. He has a couple that works with him. They're partners with him in his business. And he said he's very straightforward about everything. He said, I don't remember her name now, but he said, she's the brownest of all of us. And so she goes in first, because if I went in, nothing would happen. The deal wouldn't, right, gringo, the deal wouldn't be sealed. And I love it. I mean, because come on, it's just being real, you know, it's just that's the thing. And once somebody who's a part of the culture introduces and says, my friend Vicky is with me or is going to come, you're going to love her, then of course. And then when you speak Italian, it makes it even better, right?
Yeah, very much so. Yes. So, you know, the sort of, you know, I speak Italian, but I don't get the unspoken Italian. And so that's why you need Olivia as my wing woman. Andrea, of course, is Italian as well. And so he's bilingual and so, well, trilingual. Actually, he speaks all the languages in Europe. But I mean, it's that's a wonderful thing. And you know, we go out filming sort of every 6 weeks or so. We can't do it for too long. I always say that we end up in a carb coma because the ladies don't cook for YouTube. I mean, they cook for us. So it doesn't matter that lunch starts at 10 in the morning or whatever, but you know, so we all sit down to a most beautiful meal, and it's very rude not to say yes to second helpings.
Yeah.
So the book too is a compilation of, you know, the sort of greatest hits, if you like. You know, it's a result of the pandemic. You know, people were, I mean, there's a huge increase in viewing of Pasta Grannies through the pandemic. People wrote to me all the time saying how important it was to be able to watch them and to unwind and to take comfort from them. I, of course, I you know, it's not why I set up the channel. I mean, that's just what's happened, and I'm very humbled by that. But that was, you know, so now I have a responsibility for my grandmothers and the audience. You know, you know, people have very moving letters about their experiences, and so I was less interested with this book about, you know, making sure I had all the different pasta shapes from all around Italy. I just thought, well, you know, what are people going to enjoy making for their family, with their friends? So there are 1 or 2 recipes which are more complicated, like casatelle with an E, from Sicily, which is kind of a fish broth and a sweetened ricotta in the middle, and it's slightly kind of North African and interesting, and you know, they're more difficult to do. But if you've got a group of friends, you only have to make 3 each or something, so you know, it's not too difficult. And you can always make them like Cornish pasties and cheat, so they'll taste the same. Yeah, so you know, this time there's sort of several lasagna recipes, and there's a pizza, and then so 2 pizza, and then some pie recipes, and even some puddings go in there. That's a very English word, pudding, isn't it? Dessert, dolce. So, you know, there's some wonderful stories around tiramisu and how that sort of has its origins in sort of nursery food and grannies whipping up a little bit of sugar with an egg yolk, and in some cases adding a little bit of wine or masala, you know, and giving that to their beloved grandchildren. And so that kind of evolved, or at least it sort of, you know, has partly, it's got its origins. Some say, you never know with Italian myths, but so yeah, you know, there's a good collection of recipes. And this time round, we've got QR codes. So actually you can cook along with the nonnas, because you can, you know, have the book and scan with your phone and watch them at the same time as reading about them. So, which I think is quite cool.
It is. It really makes it, well, it adds to the experience. And for many people, it really makes the recipe even more accessible if they feel like their skills are a little lacking, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think always with pasta, particularly, it's quite easy to get to a certain level of competence. You know, you're not going to make it to grandmother kind of Zen master level of cooking, because that does take years of practice. But you know, you'll be able to kind of create something passable. And there are always different pastas to choose from, and there is always a packet of pasta in your cupboard that, should all else fail, it won't be the same mouthfeel. Dry pasta. I mean, dry pasta has a kind of different role to fresh pasta. So there are even a couple of dry pasta recipes in this book, because it's not a sort of second best. It's what for me with Pasta Grannies is like collecting these skills that were dying out. It's not that was these are really obscure pastas. I mean, with good reason. I mean, if it takes several days to make it and then 3 seconds to eat it, you're going to go for an easier pasta to do in modern day life. But anyway, and then of course it is now just a vehicle for meeting the women and discovering a little bit about their lives.
I was going to ask you about this particular aspect of the pasta universe a little bit later, but since you just brought it up, let's talk about it right now. What's your take on the ability of these skills that these grannies are exhibiting in their kitchen in terms of the current modern generations, the last 2 generations, maybe the last 3 generations now? Before are these women actually, for the most part, being able to pass along their knowledge, and the knowledge is being kept going, or do you really see that there is a problem here?
Yes, it's I think what's happening is it's being professionalized. So if people want to do it, then it's kind of they're turning and making it into a business, because the sort of nature of these women's lives has completely changed for the better. I mean, so when the women who are over 85 were told as children, as a woman, you would not get married unless you could make pasta. You would not get a husband. It was a life skill. So start learning how to make it now, and you wouldn't get pasta on your table unless you could make it. So you had to have a middle-class disposable income to go out and buy your pasta. So, you know, the idea that pasta is cucina povera is a bit more complicated than that. You know, they would have it for Sunday. Some people couldn't afford it. That's why you've got these pastas which have been cut with other flours, which are cheaper, like chestnut flour. So these women, you know, if you've been making it for 90 years, then you're going to make it really very well indeed. And now women have a choice. And certainly their daughters, you know, couldn't get out the kitchens quick enough. I mean, they did not want their mother's lifestyles. And what I'm seeing is that grandchildren and great-grandchildren can see that they can have both. They can have a career and make pasta. They won't have the same skill levels as their grandmothers, unless they really practice. And so, you know, that's okay, I think. You know, you can keep going if you want to. And of course, the good news is, excuse me, I'm going to cough. This isn't live, is it?
It's not live, but it's quite all right. As you know, in the Zoom age, almost anything goes. So we're good.
Yeah, okay. Just I've got a tickle. So you know, these days it's young men and women who are interested and want to get involved. And I've had grandmothers say, oh, it's the grandsons who want to do it, because then they can impress the girls.
Okay.
You know, so that's great. So it's changing, and I think really it's like it's a window on women, a lifestyle, and that is disappearing for good reasons, but we should certainly celebrate it and acknowledge these women before they pass.
So what I'm kind of understanding, and I'm not sure that I'm getting this correctly, is that though the lifestyle and reasons have changed, and have evolved to, we'll say, a more egalitarian type of atmosphere. Perhaps there's a recognition that the cultural importance of these pastas, these dishes, and the activities of these nonnas is what's more prevalent in supporting and preserving memories now, as opposed to the lifestyle?
Yes. That's a big subject. So yes, people do recognize it. Do people do anything about it on a daily basis in their own kitchens? Possibly not. There are lots of societies in Italy who are dedicated to the preservation of certain recipes and dishes. I think there's something around that's slightly artificial, because I think recipes change whether you like it or not. But I mean, Italy is very good at acknowledging the importance of food and the importance of food in a community. So there are lots of fairs, there are lots of societies, there are opportunities for people to get involved with food in a way that perhaps there isn't, certainly in the UK. But at the same time, they are going more towards that convenience food culture as people have to work longer hours. So it's in a state of change, as everywhere.
Yes, yeah. So Pasta Grannies, I'd like to just go back a little bit and focus on the evolution of, because that wasn't even close to your first foray into food. You traveled a lot. You were exposed to many different food cultures. You wrote food guides, Taste of Place. You wrote a book about Spanish food with a Spanish chef. So how did the actual first iteration, we'll say, come about? Where was the idea born?
So I have a house in Italy. I'm very lucky to have a house in Marche, which is on the eastern side of Italy, facing Croatia, the Adriatic Sea. And I was simply casting around for just researching the food culture locally, and noticed that it was only older women who were making pasta by hand on a daily basis. And I thought, oh, that's significant, and someone must make a record of this. And that's how it got started. Food, I mean, more generally, food has always been an important part of my life. Although it's, you don't usually make much money from writing about food. So, there was a day job. So that, continued in parallel, sort of for a while, and then when Pasta Grannies took hold and became a full-time job, so I've been doing it for nearly 10 years now. I mean, so that's how it gradually got started. The physicality of pasta making meant that it should be videoed rather than written about, which of course I do write about it, and I think there is a role for books, in the way that you relate to the word and the written word in a different way than just watching it. But the physicality, the rhythm of pasta making means that it should be videoed, and so not even photography. So that's how it got started. And I think if you go back to video 1 on Pasta Grannies, you can see it's just me, rather rigid, sort of hoping that grannies don't move too much because I don't know what I'm doing. Thank goodness it's evolved. So,
was there a moment?
I get many viewers if it was still like that.
Yes, because viewers have also evolved too, right? In terms of what they're willing to spend time with.
Yes,
so it's good. But was there a moment, perhaps, when you said, "Oh, this is working. There's something happening here that's magic"?
Yeah. So for about 3 years, I mean, it was like sort of doing it every week and sort of noticing when one person unsubscribed and sort of thinking, well, of course, it's something that I love doing, and I'm going to keep on doing it because I think it's important. But this is an expensive hobby to have. you know, sort of using up life savings and all that sort of thing. So it was, and I was really pleased in the Christmas of I think it was 2017. You know, I had 5,000 subscribers, and I thought, this is amazing. I mean, it's just sort of, this is great. And then it suddenly took off. I mean, you know, there was a sort of, you know, I was a creator on the rise on YouTube, and then sort of various videos were, you know, sort of picked up and became viral, and a snowball started happening. And suddenly I was, you know, nearly 500,000 or something, and you know, the whole thing got bigger and bigger, and now it's 2.5 million across, you know, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. YouTube is the primary one. So yes, I mean, it's like, I mean, my husband always says, you know, there was a morning when I came down and I said, I think that this, you know, my channel has been hacked, because these numbers are going up. I think I should complain to YouTube. There's something wrong, you know, because it's like going like a ticker tape like this. It was just you think, no, I think you find that it's being successful.
It's great. Well, I'm sorry, I gotta catch myself here for a second. So one of the charms, obviously, is seeing these ladies.
Yes.
But the parts, I find myself attracted to just certain physical aspects of the videos themselves, and mostly it's watching the hands and the fingers of these women. That's what I mean. Just watching the knowledge that is exhibited by how they work the dough and how they measure, which is never usually with any type of measuring ingredient. It's always just their fingers, you know, picking up a certain amount or whatever, or scooping up a certain amount with their foot, their palm, you know, that type of thing. And then seeing the different types of hands, of course, from a 99-year-old woman's hands, you know, or sometimes majorly different from a 70-year-old woman's hands, for example, you know, and it's a beauty that's another aspect, I guess, another dimension of the whole thing.
Very much so, yes. Hands, yes, they all tell a story. And yes, that whole thing about not measuring. I mean, like, quite often with egg pasta, they'll start with the number of eggs that they're going to use, and then they'll add the flour to that, rather than how we say, well, we're going to have 100 grams, you know, and one egg. So it's so that confident about the texture of the pasta, and that they don't need to measure out any flour at all. It's the other way around.
And it's also fascinating too, because when you have to essentially adapt these things, you have to actually move from that particular methodology to a methodology that you can translate into specific measurements. Because, like, for example, with the eggs that you mentioned in videos, you know, well, they're getting their eggs from their neighbor and they're not of this particular size. So you can't say that in a recipe book, in a book that has recipes. You can't say, well, you have to say, you have to give people more specifics. So that's a challenge, right?
Yes, fortunately, you know, there are certain sort of ratios that can be used for pasta dough. So it's a 55% hydration for 00 flour. And so if you want to get really precise about it, you can weigh all these things out, you know, 100 grams of flour and 55 grams of egg. And I know that in America, you'll be using cups and ounces, and please, if you can just move over to metric, it's, you know, so much easier. You know, in the book, there are both. So, you know, you don't have to, it's fine. It's just, you know, my maths isn't great, so it's much easier to keep to times 10.
I like the fact that you said please. I like that's very kind and considerate of you. And
well,
I would.
It's so difficult when you're brought up in a certain way, and people say, "Oh no, you should be doing different," you know, a different way. And my reaction is always stuff you. And I've always done it this way, and it's worked. So if you, but having said that, if you could just, you know, if you want to learn precisely, and then you can kind of ignore it again once you've kind of got to grips with what it should feel like, because in the end, it is an art. In the end, you know, a different flour will behave differently on a different day, depending on the temperature and the hydration and what the miller did and stuff like that. So we can take you so far, but in the end, you have to sort of say, right, this doesn't feel dry enough. So you actually have to have some kind of judgment, and really pasta shouldn't actually feel sticky to your hands. That's all you have to remember. And it shouldn't crack when you fold it. It should feel lovely and smooth and like old heavy linen, that kind of feel.
I like that. So one of the aspects of the book that makes it easily used in a person's home kitchen is that you're quick to, you're not quick, but you suggest all the time if there are ingredients that the Nonna uses that may not be easily found on the supermarket shelf, that you can substitute this or you can substitute that. And I wanted to give an example, actually, because it's an example that I was particularly attracted to out of the book. And it was I don't think her name would be pronounced Adele, would it? Adele Getafen? Is that it? And her fried ravioli.
Oh, wow.
From Levanto. Right. Man. And I'll let you talk about it first, and then I'll explain why the details as to how you, so because since you reacted so dramatically to it, I want you to say something about it.
They are so good. So you stuff some dough, which is made with wine. And it's a kind of very smooth, elastic dough, and she has a secret supplier of foraged wild herbs, and there's this wonderful mixture from the meadows, and she won't say, and certainly her supplier won't say where she gets them from, and so it's all a secret, and we'll have to bribe them or something. No, we won't bribe them, but we'll sort of find a way to follow them one year. So yes, so you kind of stew those and you end up with this wonderful, it's a very, when vegetables being grown hydroponically, they don't really taste of anything very much, whereas these do. And you deep fry them, and oh my word, they're just so good.
So the reason that I brought this one up specifically is because it is so dramatically different than what most people would be used to in the States, I can say only. And that is that in the States, first of all, any type of fried ravioli, deep fried ravioli is usually associated with meat. It's stuffed with meat. I mean, that's just the way it is almost all the time. And it was, there are different Italian-American restaurants that take credit for inventing it, the fried ravioli, like in St. Louis. St. Louis is the home of toasted ravioli, which is deep fried first. And but clearly, this woman and the culture that she's from in Liguria, they were making this type of pasta way before it was developed in a restaurant in St. Louis. And what was in hers, you said it was a secret, but it has so many different items, but mostly filled with wild greens, whether it was dandelion, borage, poppy, wild fennel, arugula, and more. And so you say in the book, you say, look, if all you can find in your store is spinach, that works. That'll do it. And so what you have here is you have this beauty of what it is that this woman's using in her region, in her particular home, to make this particular dish, and yet we can adapt it so that if you would like to make this, you can still get the whole feel of what it's like by seeing this video and experiencing this culture from where it comes from, and you can still do it, and you can just use spinach.
Well, I happen to think that recipes don't travel. I think that the actual act of traveling will inevitably alter a recipe, because you will not find the cheese, you will not find the same herbs. So every recipe is an adaptation. And also for these women, recipes were an adaptation to their environment. They were just making the most of what they had that was freely available. Yes, we need to preserve those recipes and stick to them, but at the same time recognize that they are on a sliding scale. So I'm one of those pragmatists that says,
Mhm.
You know, you've got this is such a good recipe, you've got to try it at least once. So make sure your spinach is a sort of older one, not those kind of funny little baby leaves. You want a sort of proper spinach. It's got a bit of flavor in it, but that will work very well.
Mm-hmm. And then try to, if you can, luckily in these days, so many foods that were once regionally known only are available at specialty food stores. So this particular recipe calls for Parmigiano Reggiano, which is readily available, not even in specialty stores. And I think it had Pecorino Sardo, which is a little bit harder to find, but you can find it.
Yes, it's a sharp cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Strongly flavored one, and I think particularly, I mean, we all know that Parmigiano has that wonderful umami, and you know, unfortunately it is readily available. Some of the other cheeses are more difficult, and it's even difficult to think of substitutions when, you know, in Britain it won't necessarily mean the same in the States, or even all, you know, in one part of the States. You just have to get to know your local farmer, actually. See, so your dairy maker, you know, I think it's quite important that, you know, it's like, yes, we all go to supermarkets, but if you can actually find the time to, you know, find your cheesemaker and see what he has to say.
Right.
He would love the challenge, I think.
Right. So for your own self, your own experience, you've been doing this, as you said, for almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
What do you think, when you reflect on it, what are the most important things that you take away from this experience?
Oh, well, meeting the women, obviously, it's so, it never ceases to humble and amaze me, that they open their doors to complete strangers, and welcome us into their homes, and then we move their tables and open their windows and so, do you mind if we just move this light a little bit here, you know? And they go, yeah, all right, or no, thank you, I'm going to do it my way, and in which case we climb over, you know, chairs and try and make it work, and stuff. So that, and so, you know, even if someone says I'm making tagliatelle, you know, there's always something new. There's always something new to discover about what they think works as a recipe and stuff like that. So it's endlessly interesting, even if it is tagliatelle again, because it isn't just tagliatelle again. It's always kind of bound up in their lives and how they've learned to cook and stuff. So that's what I love. In terms of the sort of main takeaways is, I think I've probably left it too late, because these women have stayed active all their lives. They don't, I always joke that they don't have a comfortable chair in their homes, because they're always active. I mean, they don't sit down. They have something to do, they have people to see, and that whole thing of being connected to their community and their family and their friends remains with them. You know, and there hasn't been a retirement, that, you know, it's been just a continuation of a busy life, and that's what keeps them healthy in their old age. So it's not about longevity, it's about health in your old age. So you know, that's important.
Well, I have to say, I don't think you left it too late, because you're obviously experiencing it with them and you're sharing it with all of us. So we're lucky, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm nearly I'm 63 3/4. I'm nearly 64. And it's like, oh, I didn't expect to be doing this at this stage of my life. And I have no intention of stopping. So, I mean, I hope.
So has your experience, how has it transformed you? Because you already were familiar with many different food cultures.
Yes.
Has it transformed you on the level of your practical experience in the kitchen?
No, I don't think it has. Because it's a full-time job, actually. So I'd probably say it's sort of made me slightly more. I have less time for cooking, but I still make time to sort of cook. I still, you know, cook every evening, for example, because I enjoy it. But I don't spend hours poring over cookery books and going, ooh, you know, Ottolenghi has got this rather nice new recipe. You know, let me try that. It's like, oh my gosh, it's 8 o'clock. I've got stuff to cook. You know, so it's any recipe that's easy. So I mean, you know, there are sort of inspirations around the pasta, the I love pasta. There are several pasta with pulses. I love pasta and beans. I mean, it's such a wonderful combination. So that I very much enjoy. So an easy one to do.
Have there been any revelations in terms of ingredients that you just were like, oh my gosh, I never thought of using it this way, for example, or I couldn't even imagine how it could taste like this together?
I'm sure. I'm just trying to remember offhand. I think one of the unusual ones that's gone into the book is the leek and cabbage ravioli with lots of cheeses, because it's like you don't often come across cabbage or leek, and to discover it, I was like, yeah, this is gonna take the world over the world. This is the most wonderful recipe. I'm sure it won't, but it's sort of like, it's because full of my favorite things. You know, so that was that I enjoyed discovering that one. I mean, I enjoy all new ones.
Sure.
There's a slight tension with the channel, because it's like I get excited by unusual recipes, and not everybody feels the same way. They'd rather see a lasagna. And so it's like I have to give them a lasagna, and then next week I'm going to go off to, you know, friuli and some very obscure sort of little ravioli that I've found. You know, I might put it up.
So do you feel free? Do you feel free to do what it is that, oh, this is really interesting. Do you feel free to do what is making you excited, or do you feel like there's that tension is really very real in terms of, oh, I need to do something that's more within the realm of what my, you know, viewers can do in their home kitchens?
Yeah, it's a good one. So I'm always aware of that. It's like I have an audience and a responsibility to the audience. So yes, I like to see a balance between the crowd pleasing, comforting ones, and then throw in a few of the you know, make sure they're spaced out. Otherwise, everyone goes, look, I'm never going to make that. You know, give us a break.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I do think that is of foremost importance and that you do bring out, and just even in what you mentioned, a leek and cabbage, because these are two very common items that people don't use in the States, will say, I don't know about elsewhere, aren't as commonly used in cooking or in pasta dishes, but they're very generally inexpensive items. And what you're doing, or even today, someone at my home who was a guest made this dish that was all celery. It was like, hello, it was delicious. It wasn't even, it was just delicious. It was made with celery stalks. And so this is, many of these nonnas, that's what they're doing. They're cooking with these ingredients, as you said, that are readily available, that their cuisine was born out of, it has its roots for the most part in cucina povera, the cuisine of the people, the rural type people who, you know, had to make do with what they could find. And so this is important even today, because people are seeing huge increases in costs in terms of their food bills, and for them to be able to actually see, well, I could use leeks, I can use cabbage, and I can make this tremendous, I don't need you know, $7 a pound Brussels sprouts, for example.
No, you don't. You so what these women can teach us is about frugality, sort of using simple ingredients to make some great dishes. So that does mean, you know, you might spend a little bit more time on preparation, but the results are worth it.
That is in and of itself is a tremendous lesson for today, when so many people feel like, well, you know, I have to have the best, or I have to have, you know, this costs so much, but it's what everybody says is so great. But really, it's you can take the humble ingredients that are available anywhere. And matter of fact, I and we could do this if we had the skills, for many of us, depending upon where we lived. I remember being with some friends in Italy, and she said, sorry, I got to try to catch myself here. So she said, let's have salad with whatever we're doing. She walks outside the door and she starts digging stuff out of the yard. You know, it wasn't a garden. It was, she starts digging stuff out of and she's explaining, oh, this is this and this is that, you know, and we're like kind of taken aback a little bit, right? And It was delicious. It was fantastic.
Oh, yes, the best salad I've ever had was foraged. Um, it's just, wow, the flavors of it were a revelation. Yeah, and the best tomato I've ever eaten was picked off a vine and given straight to me. Had never been anywhere near a fridge or anything like that. It was absolutely delicious.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you about an experience that you were asked to support. Evidently, I'm changing the subject a little bit here, but you were asked to support the launch of Disney Pixar film.
Oh, yes.
Luca. What was that like?
Oh,
How did
well,
that come about?
such good fun. Of course, people go, oh, Disney's the devil. It's like, no, it's fine, because these granny, I mean, I always think first and foremost is will my grandmothers enjoy the experience?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they were completely thrilled because that, they get so many gold stars from their grandchildren and great grandchildren that, there's sort of, I mean, there was sort of village screenings of Luca as a consequence along the coast in Liguria so it was lovely to be asked, and we had great fun filming it, because so it was a reaction video for people who don't know. So I got so the marketing of Luca involved what is called a reaction video, where you get the trailer and you play it to people and see and film their reactions to it. So some grannies kind of burst into song and kind of got really into it, and others went yeah, that was nice. It's like, okay, well, we'll leave that to Jason to work out whether he's going to use that one or not.
Editing.
He did. Yeah.
Perfect. That I just think for me it's just wonderful, because it's like, here you are doing this thing, and then all of a sudden you get asked to do something that's totally in line essentially with what you're doing, but it's so different and out of the ordinary. And I just imagine it just adds extra fun to, you never know what's going to come out of this effort that you've been making.
Yeah, I mean, it was great fun, and we loved it. The grandmothers loved it. I mean, so in collaborations, you sort of have to ask yourself, is it suitable for the values? Does it respect the grandmothers? Are they going to have fun? And if it sort of ticks all those boxes, then we'll do it. It doesn't happen very often, I have to say, but
I bet it doesn't. So again, I want to come back to the fact that there are many dimensions to your video. I mean, people can watch it just for watching the grandmother make a pasta, and then if they want to try to do it in their own home, they can do it. But there are these other dimensions that come into play, because first of all, you show some parts of the area where these people are from. So people get, in a sense, a travelogue even. That's a part of it. There are there's video of the interior of the kitchens, and depending on upon the age of the participant, there are different types of decor that are seen, different types of tools that are used. I love sometimes there's this juxtaposition between the modern tool and the tool that's maybe 70 years old or whatever, and it's been in the kitchen. I mean, there are so many amazing dimensions to these videos that if you pay attention, you're like, oh, hey, look at that, or oh, did you see? I'm a fan, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. It's and it's amazing what people pick up and they go, oh, and actually, so the pasta boards, for example, vary depending on type of pastas that women make. So in Emilia Romagna, you get these huge boards because they're making huge sfoglias, whereas down south they don't need to do that, but they are making cavatelli, so it needs a little rim round it so they don't all roll off their boards. So that's these things all have little stories, and I should do a video about it.
That's a great idea. Please do that. So are there specific basic pieces? I mean, I know there are specific basic pieces of equipment that everybody should have. In the book, there's a very brief section that talks about a few things.
Yeah. So it depends on what sort of pasta you want to make, and if you know that you're going to make sfoglia, don't rush out and get your huge board immediately, because you then have the headache of where to store it. And, you know, most of our grandmothers have a kind of ledge underneath their kitchen table, so they can store it underneath there. So if you only have a smaller board, then cut your dough into smaller sections and do it that way. You know, but sort of easy things like gnocchi lunghi, for example, which is like peachy, a long spaghetti-like pasta. You don't need anything other than your hands and a board. So you can start on things that don't require any equipment at all. And then if you think, actually, you know, I'm committed and I love this, then you can sort of find, you know, get yourself a rolling pin and stuff. And actually, I say in the book, you know, if you don't want to commit to a proper rolling pin, then get yourself some doweling. Take yourself it'll warp eventually, but you've only spent $2.
Right, because actually I think it's called a mattarello, right?
That's right. So the long rolling pins they're called mattarello, mattarelli plural. And they need to be made from wood that is already seasoned, so they don't warp. And so there is a certain skill in creating those. So, you know, the local sort of craftsmen, or their husbands or their fathers or whoever made it had that skill. You may find it more difficult locally to find your carpenter or furniture maker to do that. There are online specialists who you can buy from, but, you know, make sure you're going to use it on a monthly basis before you commit to $100 or whatever it is it might be less, but, you know, some beautiful ones out there.
Yeah, I've seen, you know, how chefs are always pictured carrying their knives around. I know there's this one chef who specializes in pasta, and I've seen videos of him where he's actually got his little case with his mozzarella inside that he carries with him, you know.
Well, he has to go in the hold because they're offensive weapons.
Yeah. Right, exactly. I've had so much fun talking with you, and I want to just, you know, continue, but, you know, you've got to get going, and I should get going, but I can't think of anything more fun to do than talk about pasta. So,
oh, well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me, and I hope I haven't been too silly.
No, not at all. It's great. I can't let you go yet, though. I just have to ask you, is there anything else that you would like to make sure that everyone hears about in relation to the book, and in relation to your grannies, in relation to, you know, what you're doing, any of those things?
Oh, just please buy it. So shall I do this in case there's a video?
Yes.
So I'm very proud of it. I think, you know, there's some lovely stories. It celebrates lots of lovely recipes and the women behind those recipes, and a couple of men.
A couple of men. Right.
Yeah, no. So the men do make pasta. It's not that we only want to film. You know, every time we find a pasta grandpa, we kind of go, yeah, let's go find him. It's just that it had the division of labor traditionally meant that women got to do it and men did the heavy lifting in the field. So the men who've come into it have actually have been botanists, and then, you know, wanted to sort of pair their herbs with the pasta, or in one case, you know, mum was a widow, had 6 sons, somebody had to help her. So, you know, there are different ways of men getting involved. And now that, you know, everybody does it, it's you know, there's no gender bias on it, but it's good.
So actually, one last thing I want to ask you, is there a story behind how you found Livia, your granny find?
Through a friend, actually, a friend who runs cookery holidays, and I happened to be having a chat with her, and she said, "Oh, do you mind if I bring along Livia?" And so then about a year later, I thought, oh, she probably has the skills that I'm looking for, because she helped run these courses in different parts of Italy, and she had to kind of find local, you know, specialists. And I thought, well, you know, she's got the research skills to do that. So let me see if she wants to kind of help out. And now she's, you know, 6 years later, still I think, you know, she could probably do it without me, but I'm still very keen to come along. It's like,
Sure. Did you find all the grannies before that though? Before you had lived?
yes. So I mean, so it's yes, I can. It's slower. I mean, it's just like, because it's a weekly thing. You know, it's easier to have someone on the ground doing it. You know, Livia's working on Piedmont and Liguria as I speak. So I'm here in the States, but I can't do anything. So it really helps to have her working on doing the research on that. So that's how it works. And
Got it.
So yeah.
Well, I want to just say again, thank you.
I should really have her here. I should have her kind of like sort of, and she will say, no, you can't say that. She's very precise.
Vicky Bennison, thank you again for being here. The book is Pasta Grannies-Comfort Cooking, and full of wonderful, not only recipes, but stories. And it's been a pleasure to have you as a guest on Great Taste.
Likewise. Thank you for inviting me.
You're so welcome. You've been listening to Great Taste. Maybe you've been watching Great Taste, 60 Minutes of Deliciousness. I'm your host, Steve Boss.